Okay, in this discussion we're having here, we have to keep time in our minds, not because we're behind time. Right now, we're very good in time. But we will have the Deputy Minister of the Economy of Ukraine joining us electronically at 16:30. And that is why I would like to keep this time in mind. We will have to interrupt any discussion we might have then to listen to the Deputy Minister, which is something that we enjoy doing. I want to begin with Manuel Inau. He is CEO of Cook. Cook is a Swiss company operating in the place where I live. And this is just a coincidence. We'd never, well, actually we met before, but we were not, we were not clear about that. But we met before, but we never met in the capacity that he is now. And I would like to give you some introductory words. Can you tell us who is Cook? Who are you as an entrepreneur? And as an entrepreneur, what would make Ukraine interesting for you?
Actually, I'm the representative of the company because of the position. Cook is a manufacturing company which is focused in customized winding coils. So mostly all of you have something with coils to do in the daily business, for sure in mobile phones, in the car, some hospital tooling, and Cook is operating from our headquarters in Appenzell, and we have 7 other legal entities. It's in China, in Shanghai, Bangkok, in Holland, France, Tunisia, and we have the luck that, and that's why I guess I'm sitting here, is we had the chance to take Ukraine people into company in Appenzell, quite offensive. We went to the refugee center actively and asked to support because our workload was so high that we needed to have people. And we knew from our other daughter company, it's actually the other one in Slovakia, East Europe, that Ukraine's people are quite good educated in electronics. So we found high educated people in very short time, from June 22 until now. In Appenzell I have 220 people, over the world it's 1,000. In Appenzell we have already 15% of Ukraine staff people. High educated, normal educated, also women, which having the kids in the school, very good integrated, and this is actually the story of Cook. We are manufacturing coils, and I think I got this stage because of this high people of Ukrainians in the company with around 15%.
So 15% of your staff in Appenzell, which by the way is a small village, 15% of your staff in Appenzell is from the Ukraine. But you as a company, you are not in the Ukraine. What could be interesting for you in Ukraine? What would make Ukraine interesting for you as an entrepreneur to get in there and maybe have a footprint in the country?
Our strategy is to be as close as possible to the customer. Also in terms of logistics way. For that we need people. We found that people from Ukraine came quite good into our company and fit very good into the scope. So we were considering to open another manufacturing site in Ukraine in the future, and this is not the decision made. I have opened other companies in Asia and other countries, but what I need to say is it must be simple, and it's very easy to say. And also in the company, if the company runs quite efficient and effective, you have a simple setup, and we need to have a simple setup to come into the country and open the factory. I can give an example. Thailand, in Bangkok, I opened within 2 months. I think it was one of the fastest building Swiss company abroad with a a 100% daughter company without joint venture. The fit, the simplification at that time, and maybe some good relationship was the trigger that we were successful. And it's actually the most important thing, the first impression for us as leaders. If we can go into a country and it's simple, we believe in it. If it gets complicated, maybe we're struggling quite later. And just to say, in Bangkok, I had a lot of paper seeing when I was showing my business case. But at the end, it worked very well, and I hope this could be also the vision of the Ukrainians when manufacturing companies, in my perspective, I'm talking about manufacturing, we need to have simplifications. All over around the world, everything is too complicated, so make sure that the simplification is given.
When you talk about simplification, you talk about regulatory simplification of how to set up and run a company.
Yes. Well, there are different discussions we can have what is simple. For me, as I said, first step, the business case needs to be approved in a very simple way that the government believes in my company to have the footprint. This is the first goal. The second is, I need to understand, for example, the tax rate in a very easy way. In 2004, Slovakia decided to have a 19% tax value on all taxes. This was in 2008, our decision to go to Slovakia. It was very simple. Everybody understood very well how much they needed to pay, no individual solutions, and it was simple. The economy grew very fast in Slovakia. Now, it changed, unfortunately, but this is an example of simplification.
Mr. Prowse,
Yes.
how simple is the Ukraine?
Ukraine is not complicated. Ukraine is a European country. You can't compare Ukrainians to Russians. They're different in mentality, etc. Ukraine is more Slavic. That means more European. Of course, it's, if you are new to the country, it's a kind of a jungle. The same would be in the Far East, as you said, etc. But at the end, I have personally founded 2 companies in Ukraine. One in Kiev, one in western Ukraine in Mukachevo, in the oblast of Transcarpathia. That was a question of 1 or 2 weeks, and you just need the right people, not to support or say to protect you, but to support you. So ask a tax advisor, not necessarily 200 euro per hour. You find it better if you know where to search for. Ask a lawyer to have the statutes, shareholders agreement, etc. Find a managing director if you don't have a residence or work permit, etc. It's easy to do that, and it's easy to find motivated people. It's not complicated.
In the morning we had... Yes, you can. In the morning, we had this whole discussion, descriptive discussion about the state of Ukraine today and the outlook and how we can get to that outlook. Now, if you talk to entrepreneurs, if someone says, I am interested, but I don't know how to go there, what would you counsel them?
When I was in top management of international groups, and at the end I was chairman of the board, when we decided we do something in China, I first asked international banks. They have surveys on China, how is the economy, etc. Then normally you have an ambassador, you ask the ambassador, he will get you some information. You have, for example, from the Austrian point of view, it will be the same with the Swiss. You have a commercial counselor, you ask these people, and then nowadays you have the internet. So take some time, go through officially available literature, and not all is, shit, what you find in the internet. And this gives you a good idea. Then prepare a visit, go there, You already know the questions, part of them have been answered, and the rest you will get on site. It's just a systematic approach what you need, and it's not a miracle.
Dmitry, if I can ask you something. A lot of Swiss entrepreneurs look at Ukraine and see the big chance, the opportunity. But at the same time, they are somewhere wary that there are, let's say, governance questions. Not only political governance questions, but also corporate governance questions, which are completely different there and here. And sometimes they also think that it would be good if there were a body to help us navigate the circumstances. What could you say to that?
Well, this morning we've heard by how much corporate governance is embedded in the Lugano principles that were exposed last year. And, well, let me be very, I would say maybe brutal or put some shade on the picture we hear for the past 14 months about Ukraine, right? Everything's very emotional, everything's wonderful in Ukraine, and my question is, why are we in such a political situation today, right? An economical situation today. And we, so I think corporate governance is a very important topic that must be deeply embedded in the Ukrainian institutions and Ukrainian state-owned companies or Ukrainian companies. I don't agree with you when you say, let me disagree with you when you say that governance here and there, I mean in Switzerland or in Western Europe and in Ukraine is not the same. In fact, what we're doing today in state-owned banks is embedding good corporate governance. And through good corporate governance, we are improving transparency, we are improving rule of law, we are improving sustainability to make state-owned banks more profitable and able to sustain the Ukrainian economy. So you've been speaking about investing in Ukraine. We've been speaking about foreign banks, but in fact today the Ukrainian state-owned banks are the driver of the Ukrainian economy and the Ukrainian. I mean, they are those who are maintaining and financing the Ukrainian economy, right? Especially in the agro sector, in the defense industry. We've been financing the energy last year when there was a crisis. I mean, nobody could find any oil for the cars. We've been financing, so I said, yeah, the defense sector. Today you have 4 state-owned banks in Ukraine that constitute 53% of the assets under management. And those are those who are financing the Ukrainian economy. In fact, and it's quite understandable in the sense that if you are a foreign bank, you are supposed to comply with the rules of your group, of your mother company, right? Suppose you're, let's say, Ukra Bank, daughter company of BNP Paribas. You will never be able to finance the defense sector, for instance, or you're not going to take risks because you have, compliance, war, etc., etc. So in the current context, state-owned banks are those who are really sustaining, supporting the Ukrainian economy. And the reform of corporate governance we've been setting up in those banks, I believe, should be the model for the state to reform the governance of its other state-owned companies. The main ones we know, but without that, the Ukrainian, let's say, society won't be able to reform, to get on another level of governance as a whole. You cannot have an economy or you cannot have a state functioning with rotten foundations. And this is what we are doing today by setting up OECD principles. And I believe this is an example for the state. It should be an example for the state.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, would you also finance a foreign company setting up shop in the Ukraine? Of course, depending on the business case.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the business case, yes. We finance. We in fact, since 2022, so since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian state-owned banks have increased their portfolio by 1 billion euros. So those are really the ones who are supporting. And yes, we finance. We hear. I mean, disputing on the business case. Yes.
Manuel, I want to go back to you. You said things need to be simple, and then you heard that things are simple. You said, well, you didn't say that, but you also now heard that there is financing. What else do you expect? It's apparently simple, and apparently there is money. What do you expect else?
I think, for sure, it's simple to build up a company if you have the good connections, if you're at the right time, at the right point. Somehow you can manage this. Maybe not, I don't know yet, but I had big luck so far. One mistake, for example, I did in China, and I broke down the project on building on the factory number 2 was the misunderstanding of communication. There is for sure much more easier in, let's say, in Europe compared to Europe with the nation process. The example was I wanted to have a building with 16,000 square meters production area with a controlled area of, let's say, between 20 and 35 degrees, and I can manage it with an air condition. But in the agreement with the government, it was a garage. And the budget was released already. So instead of, let's say, 10 million US dollars, or let's say $3 million US dollars, it costed $10 million. So the misunderstanding of standardization, for example, this is what I can give you also in this round. We need to standardize something for a manufacturing company. I want to have building quality number 1 or 2. This would, like standard operation procedures, we know that from the military. It makes things in some situation much easier. So this is another option and discussion. And the willingness of working, we had it before, is our most important. We have adding value in the production. The willingness of people to work is very important. So they need to see in the country of Ukraine that they can grow their prosperity in the future. If they can grow their prosperity, then the base is given that they're willing to work.
Let's go to you, back to you, Alfred, if I may.
May I first have an addition to what my colleague has said, talking about China or whatever. It's also in Ukraine, it's a question of intercultural gaps and intercultural understanding you have to have. Because the culture of different countries is different. And if a Chinese is smiling at you when you make a proposal, it does not say that he's in agreement. He's just polite. And if a Greek or an Indian person, you ask him something and he does like that, it's not a no. That means I will consider it. You have to understand the culture of the others. Sorry, your question, please.
No, you can continue, because that is very related to my question. My point is you cannot go there and expect it to be like here. But what about the security of a legal environment on which you can count, on things not changing too often, on you having a contract, for example, with a municipality or with a region, with an oblast, and that contract being valid for the next 10, 15 years? How secure is that situation?
This has been a problem all the time in Ukraine. This is a question of predictability, and that was not always the case. I may mention the issues with renewable energies, solar and wind. There have been laws with a special tariff for that, and this tariff has been revised. So that means the plannings and the business plans, they have been invalid later on because the repayment time was not, after these changes, was not 6, 7 years, it was 15 years. So this is a problem, but this is now taken care by the European Union under the candidate status scrutinies, the 7 issues which have to be complied with by Ukraine, and one is rule of law, predictability, accountability. So this will certainly, and it has already improved, and it will certainly improve further.
But the company is used to be agile and setting up new. If the environment is changing, you need to be agile enough with your structure organization to fit in that. Best example is China. With opening this COVID situation, what kind of new rules now we have in China because of more monitoring discussions. It's the willingness of work, I said it before, is here, but now the company gets more and more, and the government is monitoring more and more, for example, the overtime. People are willing to work, they want to work, but they got blocked because the overtime is too high. So we need to be agile enough to be flexible and adjust the rules of engagement within the company. But this makes us unique. If the company is more flexible than the environment, then you have a big USP.
Agility as an USP. I imagine agility is also important in a wartime economy. And Dimitri, I just want to ask you directly, how is it to do business when there is a war going on in your country?
It's a permanent adaptability. It's basically you're living in unknown unknowns. Well, especially during the first months of the invasion. So remember, Ukraine is at war with Russia since 2014. So what happened since 2022 is a full-scale invasion, but the war exists already for the past 9 years plus. So basically you never know what is going to happen, and you have to permanently adapt to the new normal. So this morning you have a new normal. Tomorrow you might have a new and different new normal. So I'm in the supervisory board. I'm supervising operations and IT, and cybersecurity as well. And we had to ensure that our services were fully functioning from day one of the full-scale invasion. And so we permanently adapting to what is going on. The first months were to ensure that we have our staff safe, that our data is functioning. We move data abroad, so we transfer the risks at some point. So our main infrastructure is now abroad in another country, where we have, let's say, a better availability, backups, and so on. But now our issue is, how do you connect to those data? How do you connect to your IT infrastructure, which is abroad? So that's your new normal. Before that, you had one normal, which is ensuring continuity of your activities inside Ukraine. So basically, the risk is losing your data center. Now the risk is not losing your data center, is losing your internet connection. And tomorrow you might have an infrastructure that is shared, and that is going to disrupt your connection. And then you have to find another way. So you have to adapt your business continuity plans on a permanent basis. If you remember, the situation last year stabilized in May, and from May until 10th of October, companies were more or less running in a normal mode. And then Russians started shelling the Ukrainian energy infrastructure starting from 10th of October. That's the new normal. I've been in Kiev last year in October, November, December, and every time we had power disruptions, we had air alerts, and we had to adapt. So it's really a question of permanent adaptation. And I would say, so what I see is that our colleagues are extremely good at that. So everyone is really willing to work, especially the first months of the war, the invasion. People were working overtime to ensure continuity of services.
Hervé Lohr, now you had some time to observe this discussion among the entrepreneurs. They are talking about garages and nodding and smiling and business continuity and data centers and so on. How does this kind of discussion influence your work as a negotiator on the international scale? Let me rephrase that. In the morning, you were presenting all these different packages that Switzerland and multinational donors are making for enabling investment and the reconstruction of the Ukraine, and then you listen to that kind of discussion, which is a different sort of discussion. How does that feed back into your work?
Thank you. I'm absolutely happy for that question. I think at SECO we started autumn last year to say we don't have a mandate of the Federal Council, obviously, but at some point in time, it's quite clear that there will be a big discussion about rebuilding and reconstructing Ukraine. So around, we've been in first meeting in Berlin, for example, mid-October last year. We've been in Warsaw in February this year. And obviously at some point in December, we gave ourselves terms of references. But before doing that, we've been discussing with association, business association, chamber of commerce. So people that are more exposed and that are basically in the field, no? We are sort of living a little bit in our bubble, and we were absolutely conscious about that. So we tried to reach out. We had first information that helped us slowly to draft these possible measures. And of course, we observe what the international community is doing and other states are doing. I mean, there are countries around Ukraine that are much more exposed. I think of the Baltic states, or I think of Poland, etc. And they have been extremely vocal, of course, and they have been extremely active. So we got information as well from them. Starting from there, I would say beginning of this year, we made some sort of informal reach out to different business association again, and Chamber of Commerce. And I think this kind of iterative process is going to, to unfold further on in time in the coming weeks and months. It's not going, so what I presented, and I think I alluded to that during my speech, is basically, what I'm saying today, probably in a couple of weeks and a couple of months, we will have to adapt. And I think that's what basically you're exactly saying. Since the beginning of the conflict, you need this agility and you need to rethink all over the process. So I think the best answer I can give is we're trying to keep, despite being an administration, keep being agile and keeping in the listening room to what businesses are saying, and that's the reason why we are here.
Yes, I want to say, especially to Swiss businesses, is that at some point you also have to take risks, right? If you don't take risks, if you don't invest in Ukraine, someone is going to do this instead of you, right? They are going to harvest the risks. I mean, Ukrainians are taking risks today, and thanks to that, they are able to have the country still functioning. And I'm discussing with several business opportunities with Swiss companies, and they are like, yeah, we think about it. I understand there's still a war going on, an active war going on, with a lot of uncertainties. I know the Ukrainian state is now working on an insurance, on a state insurance, to give some insurance to companies that would be willing to invest. But at some point, you have to be there already to ensure that your business is going to function once the war is won. Once the Russians have their ass kicked and they are leaving the country, right? If you don't take risks now already, is this going to be too late when the war stops? Chinese will be very active in that. I believe Middle East will be very active with that. And well, better come now, take risks now.
Yeah.
I want now to have Hervé Lohr, because the two entrepreneurs, the other two entrepreneurs are itching. They want to talk, but I will let them itch a little longer. Hervé Lohr, please.
Thank you. No, I think that's extremely important what you've been saying right now. At some point, you have to take risks. The issue is how much risk you're willing to take. That's a question. And I think what the role of the state in this, in the very liberal tradition of Switzerland, is basically in that framework condition to try to find more flexibility. I've been speaking this morning about de-risking instrument, and I've been speaking about export risk insurances, this kind of stuff. This is extremely important that we develop that to enable and to empower the potential for companies. By the way, there are 60 companies operating in Ukraine right now as we speak. And there are, by the way, a number of these companies that are still investing. There is a big investment, about 40 million Swiss francs, that is currently discussed in Ukraine for a production chain. That's a substantial contribution for a company, I would say.
Alfred, you're a professional risk taker.
No, I just say, as you have stated, you have to take more risk in Ukraine, but on the other hand, with the projects, you have an ROI, a return on investment, which may be double as to Western standard. So no risk, no fun. It's as easy as that.
Yeah.
And if you look at the past, in the past years, under President Poroshenko, etc., it is the year of the investment, etc. Western Europe did not invest much, also not the United States. Who was doing it? It was the Chinese, because of a political agenda, not so much commercial. And it was the Turkish companies. They earned a lot of money before the war. Western companies and Western countries were hesitant. But let me come back to what was stated before, that one has to act now. If you want finance for a project, the funding of a project, you will not get that within 1 or 2 weeks. If you go to the International Development Finance Company, DFC, for example, who are also insuring the war risk as compared to MIGA, Multinational Investment Insurance Guarantee, World Bank. They are not insuring the war risk, just the political risk. So this is touchy questions, and it will take you half a year. If you go to EBRD, it may take you 1 year to get the consent for a finance for a project. If you don't start now, you will be much too late, because look at international donors. Look at BlackRock, United States. They are doing their deals. They don't talk that much, but it's billions of dollars which are in the process of being invested. And if I'm taking the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, I'm Austrian, so I don't want to talk negative. But what I hear from my friend, a commercial delegate to Ukraine from the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, it's an Austrian company which wants to invest in here and there, and they go to European Bank of EBRD, and they tell them in Brussels, sorry, it's too late, the deal has been done. So I can only agree to what was stated. It has to be started now. And don't think that there are no investments. In Western Ukraine, and I'm sure you will back that up, as chairman of supervisory board of one of the big state companies, state banks, there are investments without even political risk insurance. People are taking the risk in Western Ukraine, even some Austrian investments, Italian investments, German investments, etc. So one has to start now, and for that last sentence, the key for success is to have a two-way strategy. One thing is to have good connections to the Ukrainian authorities, because if you want to do a project which is financed by an IFI or USAID and European Investment Bank or UNOPS, United Nations, that they are also involved, yeah? Billions of dollars are moved there already. If you want to get such a finance, you need the consent from the Ukrainian authority in that this is a priority project. If they say this is not important, it will not help you. And on the other hand, last sentence, you need the contacts to the IFIs. So you have to get ends meet. You have to reconcile from both sides in order to do the project. Half a year, up to 1 year. So when the war is over and you start, you are certainly too late. Thank you.
I need to get to Manuel because he brought up all the things. He started with the agility, and then we landed in no risk, no fun.
Yeah, and there is an X day, which probably our group needs to decide go or no go, and it double hurts me for sure if I do or don't go, because obviously we believe 30% of the Ukrainians in our company, they will go back, minimum. For sure, we have taken their liabilities of the apartments and their families with there. We believe they stay in Switzerland, but I guess just 1/3 of it. So it double hurts me when the X day comes, and that's why I need to have like no risk, no fun. If the scope is not clear from the government side, which we get supported from Switzerland, we go or we don't go. This is most of the entrepreneurial decision. We don't wait for the scope of the decision from the government. If it's too late from the government scope, which they're preparing now, we don't go, or we can go or don't go without financial support from the Swiss Confederation, I would say. In China, we did the same.
What if you only get no, let me put it differently. Would you go if you had an agreement with the Ukrainian government, at what levels ever? I don't know, some national or regional government. Would you go if you had the agreement with them and, for example, with the Ukrainian bank?
Yes, because up until people from here, from Switzerland, know we are quite conservative and want to be independent. So the investment with or without government support from Switzerland will be made with or without the decision from Bern. So either it's too late from Bern, or we could miss the train. This is obviously a risk, that's clear.
Dimitri, I know that you want to say something. Whatever you want to say, can you also address the following question? Are there strings attached? Are there political or any other strings attached to the facilitation of deals between foreign companies and their activities in Ukraine? But say what you wanted to say first, and then you...
Yeah, can I use a joker for that? Because, well, in principle, they are not. But, you never know. But what I wanted to say is that a lot of money you've been talking about from the IFI, so EBRD, IFC, etc., are going to be channeled through the state-owned banks. And this is already the case today, and this is going to be the case tomorrow. So this is where the state-owned banks have a key role to play for the reconstruction. But there is no way this country is going to strive without the reform of institutions, right? You say that, well, there were the years of investments and Poroshenko, etc. Don't forget that for the past 15 years, Ukraine was a mess in terms of politics, right? I've been there from 2004 to 2009, so I was 26 when I landed in Donetsk in 2004, where it was very fun. So I bought this tie in December 2004. I hesitate between this one and an orange one, and I bought the orange one later, 1 year later, when everything settled down, by the way. So I'm very conservative. You know, now I'm Swiss and I'm extremely conservative. This is my favorite tie because it has Ukrainian colors. But yeah, I mean, it has always been a mess for the past 15 years. And the political instability made that it was a country extremely unreadable by the investors, by the embassies, by the consulates. They just couldn't read it, they just couldn't understand it, right? Because, I mean, politicians were changing, corruption was there. It was extremely difficult to do business without the rule of law. Under Yanukovych, basically, you open a business and someone comes to you and says, now this is my company, you're lucky if you get $50,000, $100,000, but then you're kicked out of your business, right? So I think now it's really the time for the government and the Ukrainian authorities to jump on this opportunity and to forget about the way they were controlling everything, right? A lot of liberals, when they came to power in Ukraine, they become very socialist and they become very conservative and wanted to have the control of state-owned companies. The state is not a manager, the state is a strategist. Politicians have to understand the role they have to play, which is setting the framework to have a thriving economy and rule of law, and the rest should be left to the businesses. And even if you have if you own state businesses, you still have to understand, I mean, you have to close your eyes, you have to feel the pain probably and say, okay, let's get it managed by professional people to make dividends. At the end of the day, so what we've been doing in the bank, I mean, I've been discussing that with several investors, and our bank, Reconstruction Bank, had the reputation of being the most corrupted bank in Ukraine. I've heard that from different people, so I was like, yeah, okay, we have to do something. So we started in 2019, and in fact, the bank has been transformed for the past 4 years. But you have to understand that state-owned companies use taxpayers' money, right? So if you're losing money, you're just losing taxpayers' money. Instead of investing that in infrastructure, healthcare, education, etc., it's just a means of, you know, how do you say that? Putting the water in the well, and just ensuring that your company still works. And we've been doing the opposite. Now the bank earns money, the bank pays dividends, doesn't use taxpayers' money for nefarious purposes, and that this goes into state budget, and this goes into welfare. And so the state has to be extremely conscious that I wouldn't call that this one because it's a very specific game of words, but it's a last bullet today, right? It's really time now to jump on this opportunity to start reforming the institutions and especially the governance.
Hervé Laure, you heard now the state is a strategist, but you also heard that there is urgency of time, at least from the point of view of Swiss entrepreneurs. How can you respond to that?
So, in one sentence, that's my biggest concern. I do agree. I fully agree with that. I think the problem that we have is that the democratic process that you need to adapt the legislation is this case, in other cases, and as soon as you have emergencies around the world, is a big issue. So basically, if you need to, revise the legislation on insurance, export risk insurance, if you need to have a legal basis for investment guarantee or whatsoever, and to reintroduce, by the way, to reintroduce some instruments that were used 15, 20 years ago, but because of our liberal order, and I'm a fan of the liberal order, don't misunderstand me on this one, then we just got rid of these instruments, and now we need these instruments, but you have to go to the legislative process, and that means you have to go to cabinet, you have to go to the parliament, and even if you are processing this extremely quickly, because that was a big headache the last months as we've looked at it, you are still in spring 2024. That is a year from now. And that's a big problem. So the other question is, how do you fill the gap? So probably filling the gap will be the kind of help that we have been provided last year and we are providing this year, to continue with that, to bridge up to the next level. The risk is, of course, that we're too late with that train. But, you know, frankly speaking, it's a war. Nobody can tell where we are in a year. And I guess that's a sobering thought, no?
Sobering, that is the word. Do you agree, Manuel?
Say again?
Sobering.
What's sobering in German?
That's a good question.
Ernüchterung.
Ernüchternd.
Could be at the end of the whole story, yes.
Before we continue the discussion, because now, in 2 minutes, the Deputy Minister is going to shine upon us, let me just comment one thing. For those who are not from here, I mean Switzerland, any law in Switzerland needs at least 2 years if it passes by, on average. If they manage to do it within 1 year, that is top 10% of speediness of lawmaking in Switzerland. We are very, very slow lawmakers. Now let me ask the technical people if we have the Deputy Minister. Not yet, yes, I heard that. I just didn't want to repeat it. But I think that Hervé Lor is preparing his microphone to say something.
No, yeah, sure, I can fill the gap. It's pleasure, Enrique.
It's always good to have
the point is,
around.
no, but you were mentioning that. I think the experts and the lawyers around the table, and you know, I'm a lawyer, so I can tell it's 10 lawyers, 10 opinions, no, basically. So the point is, we will need to see through all the panels of measures, the possibilities of measures we contemplate, which one can be triggered more quickly than the others. And definitely with some of them, probably we will be a little bit late on this. But by the way, we are not the only ones. I mean, states all over Europe are having this kind of reflection. Some are quick, some are less quick. And I hope we will do the work.
Alfred, would you go there without state support? Right now, I know that you have businesses in Ukraine, but if you had to create a new business in Ukraine, would you go there right now without state support?
I would, in Western Ukraine, I would start something if I have a good environment in that I have some safety, that the authorities would not be harassing me. This is better now, but during the war, and because of the war, this is also getting a little bit less good meanwhile. I am invested in Ukraine. I was investing, I can talk openly, no secret, several €100,000 or francs. It's more or less the same nowadays. Okay, I'm hit by the war. But the war will end somehow, somewhen, and I do hope that I get most of the money back. If not, I will not have to ask Caritas, so I will survive. So I would take the risk. A certain risk I would take, especially in Western Ukraine.
From your experience, which sectors of the economy are interesting to invest right now? right now? If someone would say, okay, let's go there, let's invest, I don't know, €1 million or franc or dollar, it's all the same thing. Which sector would you focus?
It depends who you are. If you're a private investor, it would not be so much electricity infrastructure, for example, or railways, etc. This is more for the really big players under state guarantees, sovereign guarantees, etc. But if it's private investment, industrial investment, etc., I would say, and I have been lecturing that even at the Catholic University Business School just before the war, Ukraine is a perfect location for onshoring or nearshoring. That means relocate productions, etc., which are at present in China. You know, the China problem. Meanwhile, Western Europe has some concerns concerning the future safety for their investments in China. Go to Ukraine, because in some areas they have a USB, unique selling proposition, and have some production at the doorstep of Central and Western Europe, for example. And that could be manufacturing. That for sure is IT. This is an absolutely perfect sector. It has been in the past years in Ukraine. And of course, this is agriculture, because the share of agriculture in the gross national product in Ukraine is much higher than it is in Switzerland, or say on average in Western Europe. So a modern agriculture, be it corn agriculture or husbandry, that means animals, etc., this is a very good market. So I would recommend to do that. And it's also a little bit transportation, logistics, etc. So these would be sectors I would invest in.
Whatever you wanted to say, plus which sectors are interesting?
Yeah, IT infrastructure. I believe, so many companies today are doing IT in-house, but doing IT in-house becomes extremely complex and becomes extremely costly. Don't forget that the majority of the IT components are produced in Asia. And with the current geopolitical context between Taiwan and China, there is no certainty about what is going to be in the future. If suddenly you have a war between China and Taiwan, then you lack semiconductors. I mean, take the example of the US. The US car market faced extremely enormous problems for the past years, and the price of cars increased by like 20 or 30% because of the lack of semiconductors, components they put in the cars. And so here I think there will be consolidation, and there is a huge opportunity in managed services in IT, where companies are going to outsource their business. They are going to outsource their infrastructure to big cloud players, which do not exist in Ukraine today. A lot of companies, and starting by the state, migrated their data to Amazon Web Services. They had to put them abroad, of course, because of the risk inside, the physical risk inside the country, but also because they needed to ensure availability and continuity of businesses. So here, I think there is a huge potential in Ukraine for that. It's a country of roughly 40 million inhabitants, and so the potential is here.
When you hear these stories, these sectors and the potential, does it ring a bell? Is it something that might interest you? Do you think that there is a case for you there, generally? Or do you stick to your argument, the interesting thing are the people who want to work and the market access for the products that you make?
Actually, it was, I think, proposed from, or it was mentioned in your slide. There is an immediate action from the SECO and the medium and long-term actions, and Cook would be the one for the mid and long term. We cannot make sure that the infrastructure increase or stability. This is not the business case for Cook. So we would rather go for the second term, I would say.
Thank you very much. Dear Deputy Minister, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. We were discussing about the business opportunities in the Ukraine and all the, wow, you are oversized here in this room, which is always good to have an oversized person talking to us. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. Have some critical agenda, like rolling the very last moment. So, well, the support of the business in Ukraine is obviously essential, because without the private sector involvement, we do understand we won't be able to rebuild the economy. You know that the economy shrunk substantially, and we just need to. We need to grow substantially now every year, at least 7 to 10% a year, which does anticipate the attraction of the foreign direct investments, and actually revisiting the whole economic strategy in terms of like what are the priorities, what are the opportunities for Ukrainian economy, where's the place of Ukraine in the global value chain, and what industries we could contribute the most, and what industries can be of the most interest to our international partners. In terms of like priorities, I must tell you that we're very highly focused now on the energy sector. We are working on the decentralization of the grid. We are working on developing the green component of the electricity balance. We understand that the Green Deal and the European transition is going to require a substantial amount of carbon neutral energy to be generated, which is then, like driving all the other economic components and industries of the GDP 2.0, if we could put it this way, like of the new economy, of the borderless economy, of the ESG economy, which we now have a chance to build in Ukraine. And having a number of crucial, like core competences and preferences, being a well-positioned country, very big in territory, fruitful soils. Like if we, even if we sacrifice 1% of agricultural land, we can generate renewable energies for the whole Europe using this land. And why not use this opportunity? And we're keen on developing the hydrogen development. We want to do the electrolyzers manufacturing in Ukraine. We want to generate and develop a nuclear energy with localization of the turbine manufacturing here in Ukraine. Electricity, as I said, smart grid decentralization, localizing transformers in Ukraine. We're strongly considering green steel and green metallurgy, having like the richest iron ore deposits in the world. And again, bearing in mind all those prerequisites that I just gave you, the renewable energy, the hydrogen, which are the key ways to DRI, HBI, and then the electric arc furnaces. It can all be done in Ukraine, and we have skilled labor. We have industrial parks with the turnkey, the industrial development sites. We have tax incentives we're offering, and we're working closely on the deregulation of numerous industries, and we are of course working with our partners and on providing the war risk insurance. If I can briefly touch base here, there are a number of initiatives that we are coordinating as engagement of MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, part of the World Bank Group, They are so far fundraising to the Special Trust Fund, and there was a first contribution from Japan, which MIGA is now multiplying and splitting the exposure for the trade facilitation and for the actual capex related investment insurance, which is the most interesting for us now. And MIGA is not insuring Ukrainian investors who appear to be the most interested investors so far in Ukraine, because they are there, they are very adapted to the risk, and they have some skin in the game, and the dry powder they are willing to bring back into the play, and they are gradually doing this using the international leverage. We have DFC, for instance, from US, which is ensuring not only like lending, not only providing credit risk coverage, but also war risk, political risk insurance for any country, any enterprise, even Ukrainian investors can get it. And then we have a number of extra credit agencies that are active, and I know that representatives of SERV were supposed to be in this conference, so I might use this as an opportunity to encourage SERV to revisit limits for Ukraine. I know that bringing us down in the OECD country risk rating does not really help, but at least we understand that these multiple generating more sophisticated instruments, they would mobilize the liquidity of the private sector, commercial banks, even IFIs, and then support the business from the countries of origin. In particular, like if we talk about Switzerland, we will be very keen to consider Swiss machinery. I know that there are some demining equipment, like these harvesters that are done in Switzerland, and it could be potentially purchased by Ukrainian government with the SERV coverage, again, which is not available at the moment, as far as I understand. There are a number of countries that are proactive, like UK, France. Some of them are covering, Germany is covering, for instance, both credit risk and political risks in one package, which is really like useful and practical instrument for German investors and trading partners. So we are encouraging the economic financial market system to reconsider Ukraine, because eventually it's inevitable that there will be a lot of capital flows directed here, and the way they're going to be managed and multiplied basically gives us idea of how good we can tackle this challenge of having hundreds of billions of damages confirmed by latest the World Bank RDNA report. We won't be able to do this without the private sector. And you might have heard that we also have some initiatives that we're undertaking with companies like BlackRock. We're developing Ukrainian Development Fund, which could potentially serve as the minority anchor investor underwriting the first loss risk in numerous projects in 10 industries, and be then inviting other stakeholders of the financial market ecosystems like ECAs, commercial banks, private equity funds, family offices to be co-financiers and co-equity partners in these deals. So we're creating some homegrown incentives. We're engaging with international partners, both from private, public, and multilateral nature, and we remain open for the international business. We also have a number of institutions. We have an NGO called Advantage Ukraine, and there's a platform where you can leave an application looking for the project, and it also helps not only foreign investors and lenders, but also helps the Ukrainian companies to navigate and helps them to learn how to be bankable, transparent, eligible, compliant, like passing KYCs in the banks and learning how to do that. And then we have the investment promotion agency, Ukraine Invest, that is obviously dealing with those investors already took a decision to get to Ukraine, guiding them, helping them, doing the B2G communication, some elements of GR, and making sure that there'll be no troubleshooting in the future, preventing this. So we're keen, we're open, and we're there, we're transparent, and we're changing. We're building the new economy. We under new principles with ESG components in it, and heavily integrating in global economic and financial markets.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And I also want to thank you personally for taking the time to coming in here and speaking to us. I'm sure that the day-to-day things in Ukraine are very demanding. And we were speaking here on this panel about agility, and we think that your government is showing a lot of agility right now in order to provide for a good and safe environment, as you just put to us now. So thank you very much for participating, and have a nice day. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Let's prepare for a closing statement here, but also listening to the comments by the Deputy Minister. I remembered a guy I met in several delegations of the Swiss government. I think that once we met in China, an entrepreneur, and then we met in India, and then we met in Brazil, and then we met, I think, in Spain. And finally I asked him, so what is it that you do that you are everywhere? And he says, I make screws. So, little screws. And I asked him, what? He said, yes, I make screws. I said, since when are screws so internationally important? And his answer is, very easy. All these grand plans, energy, trains, super infrastructure, they all need to be built on the ground, and for that they need screws, and I make those screws. And the minister, from my point of view, very aptly pointed out that it is a whole value chain that is needed. It's not just the big electricity producer, it's not just the big telecommunications one, it's the whole manufacturing chain that goes with it. Now, with this comment, I would like to turn to my guests and ask each of them for a final statement. You can say whatever you want, as long as this is polite and civil. I will begin with Hervé Laure.
Thank you. I think the main things I said, but one point, and probably it's alluding to what you've been saying about the issue on regulation, and as you know, in Switzerland, we're aware of this, at least at SECO, we are aware of this. And basically, a number of things that the minister was saying, there are actually right now two processes that at the strategical level extremely important. The first one is the EU accession. And the second one is the pre-accession to the OECD. Both things goes in the direction of standardization, meaning that the Ukraine in the crisis has the possibility and the ability to make necessary reforms that bring them really close to the business community here on the West. Thank you.
Dimitri, your last words. Whatever you want to say.
Whatever I want to say. Yeah, two things. First thing is that I was speaking about, the last bullet before. Even the war, even when the war stops, and even when Ukraine wins this war, there's still a neighbor, which is Russia. Russia will still be there, and the government has to ensure that the state will be strong enough to discourage further invasion from the eastern and maybe northern neighbor. Take the example of Finland, I'm quite sure that the Russians won't invade Finland, even if Finland is not part of, even when Finland was not part of NATO, right? So this is the time to build a strong state. But to the Swiss companies or Western European companies, I say go to Ukraine and have a look. Don't be scared, don't be afraid. Have a look at what happens there. People in Ukraine are very entrepreneurial, much more than we are here. They are risk takers. They don't care about business plans. They don't care about those fancy things. They take risks. They build companies. If the company doesn't work, they build a new one. If the second doesn't work, they will build a third one until it's successful. And to the Ukrainians, I would say, I'd say the following. We've been speaking, we've heard about from you before the cost of reconstruction. So we've seen the material costs, which are like $411 billion, but we didn't hear about the hidden costs. All people who are abroad today are hidden costs for Ukraine. Imagine the student who is 18 years old and suddenly went working abroad or just fled abroad because of the invasion. During 18 years, Ukraine has invested in you, and suddenly you work for a foreign government. We imagine that for the Western government, Ukrainian refugees cost a lot. No way. It's especially, I take Switzerland as an example. We have extremely low rate of unemployment. It's just a benediction for the state to have skilled, intelligent, clever people working and coming to Ukraine, to Switzerland from Ukraine. So I would say for the Ukrainians, once everything stopped, go back. Don't stay here. Go back and rebuild your country because the country will need you. Switzerland is fantastic, France is fantastic, the UK, Germany, etc. It's very fine for tourism, but go back and rebuild your country because only you will be able to rebuild your country.
Manuel, last words.
Well, I go back to the beginning. You were asking about what conditions need to be settled in the Ukraine to go forward in perspective of Cook. It's quite easy, and I do it with my children as well. There is a highway on the left-hand side. There is a fence. On the right-hand side is the fence. If you can manage by your own, the fence is larger. If you cannot manage it, I do it tighter. If we start business as a semi-size company, enterprise from Switzerland, we need to have a large, wide fence in the beginning of the left and right-hand side, and it's very similar to the sentence before. The government needs to be the strategical decision maker, and the companies, enterprises should be managed on the left to work within the left and right-hand fence. And let it not too tight. In Switzerland, we do it also. It gets tighter and tighter, and we lose competitiveness of that.
Amen to that. Alfred, you have the very last word.
Thank you very much for this very good occasion. Human resources, thank you for raising that. I'm, by the way, also a little bit consulting the Director Europe of Manpower, one of the biggest service providers for human resources. The thing is to build up Ukraine, as you have stated, and you have been too quick. It would have been part of my last words. We have to get the refugees in Western Europe to return. Without that, it will be extremely difficult to build up. Second thing and last thing, kind of a cookbook, how to do business or how to enter Ukraine.
Do you say cookbook?
You need local experience, Ukrainian experience. Without that, it's the same in China, it's the same in South America, it's the same even in Turkey. So, get good people who have the local experience. Second, get people whom you trust. I know from Western European investors, okay, there is an Ukrainian and this and that. Ukrainians can be tricky people, etc., etc. Get a bridge, get somebody whom you trust, maybe from Switzerland or maybe from Austria, sorry, self-marketing, yeah? Because this is needed and the whole thing is trust. Hesitance in investment is a lack of trust. And if somebody who knows better than you tells you, if you do it that and that and that and that way, you can do it, the risk is not too big, you may do it. So, local experience, trust, try to get in contact with the local authorities, Ukrainian authorities. That's what you need anyway. And last issue, that is the USP. If you want to enter Ukraine, you need a unique selling proposition to be better than competition, Alleinstellungsmerkmal in German. And the same applies to Ukraine. Only start business if you want to enter the market in Ukraine, and not only doing it as a sub-supplier for automotive, for German car manufacturers, like it's the case in Western Ukraine. You also have to have an area, a field of business with a unique selling proposition. If you have that, you will win, and the risk is calculable. Thank you very much.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we finish this podium or this panel. Thank you very much for the participation, for discussion, and for the agility that we displayed here. And to you, have a very nice business forum. Thank you.